The film board gathers. The gang of thugs is here to take on a movie currently in theaters. And this month we have Michael Mann's return to the big screen with Ferrari.
Two objects cannot occupy the same point in space at the same moment in time. The corner races at you. You have perhaps a crisis of identity. Am I a sportsman? Or a competitor? If you get into one of my cars, you get in the wind. Slow.
Enzo, you're going broke.
How?
You spend more than you make.
So what do I do?
Win the Mille Miglia, Enzo. Or you are out of business.
This is a gun pointed at our head. You should assign me control of your stock. I have to have all the cards in my hand.
Well, half the cards are in my hand.
All of us are racers. It's our deadly passion. Our terrible joy.
No one dreamed we'd be back.
How can I stay away?
If Italy is looking for a scapegoat, then here I am.
You were supposed to save him! You promised me he wouldn't die!
The father deluded himself!
Two objects cannot occupy the same point in space at the same moment in time.
Enzo. Go beat the hell out of that.
Ladies and gentlemen, gearheads and speed fiends, welcome to the adrenaline-infused world of racing, where legends are born on the asphalt and tales of speed and heartbreak unfold at the turn of every corner. I'm Pete Wright, revving up the excitement for an exclusive deep dive into the high-octane drama Ferrari, directed by the legendary Michael Mann and lensed by our new friend Erik Messerschmidt. Buckle up as we welcome the twin titans of motorsport commentary, the dynamic duo known for their razor-sharp insights and the ability to make you feel every gear shift as if you're in the driver's seat. They're in our Scuderia today, Tommy Metz III and Justin J.J. Jaeger. Boys, let's shift into high gear and dissect the life, the legend, the man, Enzo Ferrari. Okay, we saw it. When did we see it? Did you just see it like I did just today? Did you see it this morning? Are you that excited? Did you see it like last week?
Thursday night. Thursday
night.
2 nights
Tom?
ago.
I saw it Wednesday. Check me out.
You guys are so ahead of me.
Vroom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well,
Vroom,
it
vroom.
opened. We are really cheating the system here because this is our January movie, our New Year movie. But of course, this opened in 2023. It opened Christmas Day, and we didn't go see it on Christmas Day because I don't know why. There were other movies. We had to see Wonka, whatever. The point is, we now have seen Ferrari. It is Michael Mann's glorious return to the big screen. We were excited to see it. I think I can say, collectively speaking, we were excited to see it because of our new friend, Erik Messerschmidt, who we talked with a couple months ago. And so I'm really excited to hear your thoughts on this movie. It has met middling to mixed reviews from my broader social group. How did you feel about it? Oh, you're nodding already. Okay, who wants to go first?
I'd like to go first. Can I go first?
Yeah.
I really, really liked it. And to the point, and to the point that I actually kind of want to start a big debate with you guys about it, about how much I liked it. Not
what
because,
if we agree, though?
This is why.
Is it still a debate?
Let me get into that, because you may agree, but I liked it more than Oppenheimer.
But you were famously not terribly on Oppenheimer's
That's my point.
team.
And honestly, like, Nolan is one of my is probably my favorite director working today. I like Michael Mann. I have great history with him, but I really liked this for what it is as a biopic. talking about then making it a film that works. I think it's a very, very strong movie from top to bottom in terms of execution. I think we will find, as we talk about it, we will find interesting little quibbles and things to talk about. But for me, this is a very solid film that I very much enjoyed everything there. It took me on the ride, not a pun intended there, but it took me with it. And I was very, very happy with what I saw for Ferrari.
Okay. I'm liking the direction. All right. Everything's coming up Ferrari so far. Tom?
Vroom, vroom. More like putt, putt. I actually was very disappointed in this movie.
Oh, are you serious?
I am. I'm sorry about that.
Tell me.
I had trouble caring. It's something that I almost never have trouble doing in movies. I felt like there was so little to connect with. They kept setting up stakes that never really came true, and they'd set up like, watch out for this. Oh no, that didn't actually happen. And what if she does this? And no, she doesn't. And everyone just sort of like this. And then the whole thing is about a race who you never see the winner win. I just thought it was so bizarre, and there was just not enough to hang on to. There's only one real fleshed out character, I thought, in it. And,
I have so many questions. Pete, maybe you don't want
Sure.
me to ask the questions now, but the first thing that I want to say is that sets up a great debate for Oppenheimer, and I don't even know if we want to have that debate today.
Not on this episode, no.
In terms of stakes and
Right.
caring and all that stuff, because I mean, I feel like we've talked a little bit about my feelings of Oppenheimer, about caring and stakes and what it means, but anyway, I have so many questions with what Tommy said, but Pete, let's hear where you want to go with this first.
Well, I'll just share my opening thoughts and we can get into the story. I really enjoyed my time with this movie, with a couple of pretty significant quibbles that really stuck in my teeth. And I think the first one might be getting to where you're feeling, Tom, that I feel like the story wasn't convinced of the point that it wanted to get across at the end. And I finally feel like I got the point, but I had to do more work than the movie did to get me there. I had to fill in a lot of holes to understand what the movie was doing. And I think that's problematic. It ends up being a little bit confusing, and it ends up with a lot of these threads that I think the second viewing is actually going to be better because I know where it's going already.
Sure.
And so I deal with that. The other one is, my goodness, I really struggle with one of the performances in this thing that was unbelievable. It was, and I say that not just it was shocking how bad the performance was, it was just unbelievable as a performance. I did not believe this person knew that they were in a movie, let alone trying to do a movie in an Italian accent. So that's where I start. Let's talk just a little bit about the movie itself. It's set in the summer of '57. It focuses on a problematic character. We're talking about Enzo Ferrari. He had some real struggles at this period, both in at work in the factory making cars and at home. He had some real challenges at home. Ferrari's racing team is preparing for the Mille Miglia, the endurance race 1,000 miles across Italy, and that it was never outlined for us that this was the year the Mille Miglia ended, I think, is one of the central challenges to the narrative. Sure would have been good to know, especially because Dr. McDreamy, what's his name? I've lost his name. Dempsey was the architect of bringing down the Mille Miglia the year that he won it, right? In real life.
That sounds like an interesting movie.
That sounds like it would have been a very interesting movie. And so I think we may have been focusing, that is I think a central challenge. We focused on the wrong protagonist.
Oh, can we tell that story? I mean, I would love to hear that. I agree. I think that would be a great movie. But again, in my sort of first thoughts about it, I don't think that's what this movie's about. But anyway, how was he the architect of it? Maybe that's not for us to talk about today, but
you know what? Let's take that as a sidebar a little bit later, because there's more we can get into on the way there. So that is the story then is about this giant race, and by the time we get to the Ferraris and the racing and the race against Maserati, there's some Alphas in there. Like, there are some other cars in there, definitely some Mercedes. You don't really talk about that. I don't think they mentioned another brand another badge in the race. Besides, you see a Mercedes, you see an Alfa, but I don't think they talked about anybody else but the duel between Maserati and Ferrari, and then we have the business dynamic about how the fact that the place was going under, and they were going to have to sell a lot more cars, like 4 times more cars, and in order to actually be solvent. They didn't dive any further than a single phone call on the potential bailing out of Ferrari by Fiat, and so these are all some of those threads that end up, I think, getting a little bit confusing. The home complication, we have Lena Lardy, who is the other not wife, played by Shailene Woodley, and for Enzo had a child with her during the war, and then we of course have Penelope Cruz, his wife Laura, who owns half the company. So Ferrari is a divided individual, and that is the character that we meet, played by Adam Driver. And let us start with that. How did you feel with Driver's performance of Ferrari? Tom, I think you should start because you're the bear.
I always find Adam Driver very watchable. I thought he was very watchable in this. He was very good at being someone who shows very little. He's pretty reserved a lot of the movie, and at times he breaks open, but usually he's very hiding all of his cards, and that can make for a tough protagonist for me. Mm-hmm. I would like someone who's less guarded. He seemed even guarded when he was alone. So that's just not a terribly interesting person to hang my movie hat on for 2 hours.
Well, that makes sense. I think for me, it was very believable, right? So, and I know nothing about Ferrari as a person, but the thing that I was kind of touching on, Pete, when you made the point about the interesting things about the race and all that stuff, is that my thought about this movie, and what I ended up buying into it is that it was the story of Ferrari. So, in terms of Adam Driver's performance, I believed it. What he delivered as Ferrari felt very grounded in what the real man could be. And so I bought in with him on this path and found a lot of those things that you're talking about, Tommy, the things of him holding his cards and the way that he's doing things to be sort of part of his negotiation of the person in his life. I agree that that he's faced with a lot of, I would say, challenges, some of them of his own creation, many of them of his own creation in this, and his way of dealing with them seemed stoic to some degree, mm-hmm. in some ways calculating as well. Pete, you mentioned the one call to Fiat, but he was planting the seeds for that very early. He knew the direction that he wanted to go. He planted them in a way so that that call could be the way that it was. And so mm-hmm. I bought into the fact that he was somewhat the architect of his salvation as he went through these tragic circumstances, tragic crises throughout the story, including the big climactic tragedy that we see as a result of what happens in the race. I thought Adam Driver did a fantastic job of delivering that character performance, and I was bought into it. So I believed it.
I'm with you on that point. I'm a fan of Adam Driver, and I like the texture of his performances across films. I think he's a really interesting actor. I don't think I understood him post Star Wars until I saw Marriage Story, yeah. And then I felt like, okay, this guy's got a range that I did not anticipate. So I am always provoked to curiosity when I see an Adam Driver movie. He is deeply invested in the characters that he plays, and that comes across in this film, I think, too. This is one of those biopics where he's not, like, we're focusing on a deeply unlikable guy, I think, most of the time, right? He's not nice, really. He's nice to his son, but most of the affect of Adam Driver's performance is influenced by Ferrari's, the loss of his first son, right? The death of his first son, which is a plague on his life, right? For the most of the movie. That's a constant callback. And the bifurcation of his family life, that he has to maintain 2 homes because of this secret other partner, the mother of his second child. And I think Driver handles all of that really well. I'm really interested in how he's able to comport himself with all of the different interests in his life, and I think he does that really well. I like him. The wife and mistress. This might be a controversial point, but I think Penelope Cruz might have stolen the movie for me. I thought she was really interesting. If a touch one note, I thought I saw a different side of Penelope Cruz in terms of her performance than maybe I've seen her.
Oh, I think that's fair. And I think that harkens to the point of the story that you mentioned about the plague on Ferrari's life, which is also a plague on his family, the death of their son together, Dino. And then they also talk about the death of his brother, earlier on, that had plagued the other aspects of his family as well. And I think I agree with you about Penelope Cruz. For some reason, I didn't feel like it was one note, but that's because I guess I saw a lot of a great performance of grief from her, and delivered in a way that was both despondent and also aggressively angry at Ferrari for what he had wrought upon them in his own grief, but then also kind of angry at the world in a way, in the circumstances that she was dealt with. And I like that too. I wouldn't say she stole it for me, but I agree. I loved her performance in it.
And when I said earlier that I felt that there was one really fully fleshed out character, it was Penelope Cruz.
Nice.
So it wasn't Shailene Woodley. Okay. All right.
No, Shailene Woodley, I don't really blame her. It's a thankless role. She's given nothing.
Role.
No
what
other
do you not
woman.
blame her for, Tom? I want to hear.
I don't think that she could have done much more with it. She was written, all of the juice as far as female people in this movie went to one person, and everyone else is a sketch.
Right.
And everyone else is just failing a Bechdel test in response to the men around them.
Yes.
And so, what's her name just soaks up all the air in the room whenever she's there. I did get a little bit of one note for a while. I was actually wondering if Penelope Cruz's role was thankless, to use that same word, at first, because I was like, oh, she's the shrew. Like we're watching this guy try to achieve his dreams and she's over there just throwing things at him. But then once I met everyone else in the movie, and by met, I mean sometimes had a glance at, I was like, oh, like she is the driving force of the movie. Even if, as she does every once in a while set up stakes that are not realized. I know we're not going into the plot thing yet, but it seemed like some of this movie seemed a little bit like, woof, that was a close one, Enzo Ferrari. Like there were so many things, there were so many swords dangling over his head that just sort of went away.
I think you just described what the story of Ferrari's life was.
Yes.
Like that's you guys are
Close
talking
calls.
about that we missed the point of the story. I think that's the point of the story, that there is all this tragedy and drama that surrounded his life from the beginning, from before the film starts to through this incredibly tragic time, that so many times, even the reporters, as they come to him, are saying, how are you going to deal with it? You're a widowmaker. They're constantly swords above his head, Tom, to use your metaphor. And he made it through. And the brand still exists today because of those close calls and making it out of there. Those stakes were, that drama was imagined and real, and he got through it, which I think, again, I'm really focused. The reason why I liked this so much is because it was the biopic that I wanted, with drama and survival. I don't know. I'm picking that word carefully right now, but I guess that's why I liked it so much.
I guess if the idea is so many swords over his head and he made it through, I would have liked it to be a little bit more either emotional or from his ingenuity, from seeing him attack problems and solve them versus appear bulletproof and things keep going his way.
I like an ultimate protagonist.
That's like a Forrest Gumpy.
Yeah,
that's like just sort of like tripping your way through history does not make you an interesting character for me for this movie. And I was really turned on by how focused it was. That instead of telling the life of Enzo Ferrari, that it's this one intense moment. But then by the end of it, I was like, I did want a wider scope. I always thought that this is what I want from a biopic, and this did not give it to me. I was like, I felt like I came in late and I left early. A little bit.
I get that.
Yeah,
for sure.
I kept dealing with the struggle, and I think this is part of what you guys are talking about, the struggle of of seeing the big action feel like it was in the periphery of this guy's life. Like, like we're focused on Enzo Ferrari. In the meantime, massive cultural change is happening right off screen. And that man just didn't quite want to turn the camera there.
I think it feels, Tommy brought up Forrest Gump. I think there is a Gump aspect to it for sure in that respect.
Yeah, it's Gumpian. The racers, this is, I bring up the racers, but I bring up the racers kind of as peripherally as so many of the other things that happen in this movie. It is not, if you have yet to see it, strictly speaking, a racing movie. No. There are cars present, and they get driven in and out of garages from time to time. A lot of garage driving.
Really,
and man, these guys
into and out of
the garage. Yes, right. And then we get a couple of time trials. We lose our first driver, very early on, in the first time trial. And then we really move into the last big race, the Mille Miglia. And so the drivers, the Scuderia, or the stable of drivers, we don't spend a lot of time with them individually. We don't get a lot of time to kind of understand who they are. Fon de Portago is the main driver that we meet early on. He tries to introduce himself to Ferrari on the street. His full name was Alfonso Cabeza de Vaca y Leighton Marquis de Portago.
I love it.
What?
He actually, I love this passage about him. That was a fitting handle for a maximalist bon vivant. He was the prototype for a man we picture in our heads when we imagine an international playboy race car driver, the one with a rakish smile who craves adventure and gorgeous women. He raced cars, horses, and bobsleds, competing for Spain in the Winter Olympics. And this nod, when you have that intersection discussion where he's standing over behind a thing and there's the king, the Ferrari's between the two, and Ferrari says, "Your Highness," it is absolutely on brand for Fon de Portago to say yes, like which one, right? Because he considered himself royalty. He was. I mean, he was effectively Spanish royalty at the time too. So that is a little bit of sort of real person backstory to one driver. What did you think in terms of presenting the team of drivers? Did it come off to you as a team sport?
Yeah, team sport is interesting. I don't know that I would call it a team sport, but the group of them, I very much enjoyed the group of them and the different personality traits that were assigned to them. And I'm saying assigned because I want to give you guys I want to concede the point that we didn't get enough of them, right? So that's why I'm saying that. But the reason why I'm kind of pulling back from the concept of the team sport is because I really liked how Ferrari manipulated the team in an effort to win at all costs. And you see that so much at the mid-stop when he goes and he talks to each of them, and this is how you win. And it's different for each of them. They each have their own motivations, and Ferrari was in control. I loved that. I also loved the scenes at the table. The first scene at the table, not when he was chastising them for poor performance, but the one where he was actually bonding with them as a group that was involved in the sport together. And he talked about the fact that we are all drivers, we are all racers. That was a common theme throughout the movie too, is that we are here to win. Ferrari is here to win. And I liked that. I bought into that too. So I liked that group dynamic thing, even though it didn't really feel like a team sport to me. It felt like they were very cutthroat.
I wanted more of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it made me hungry for something that the movie was dead set against giving me. More time with them, more time with how do they all interact? Do they interact? Do they practice with each other? All we see is them driving angrily into garages. I don't know who is who to anybody. And so that, to JJ's point, the movie came alive in places like that because it was a bunch of people. It was confidently filmed. They were all talking at once. The sound design is outstanding. It really feels like a bunch of people at a table, when other times in this movie scenes felt like scenes. You're walking in, this could be a play. This could just be a moment in this one room, which didn't feel alive, didn't feel electric. It's like the movie had somehow only a certain amount of energy that it was allowed to have. And it poured it all into one character and 3 scenes.
Yeah.
And then everything else they just sort of had to also film. That's a very harsh way to say it. But no, I'm agreeing with JJ, but that is it's not the absence that makes the heart grow fonder. It makes me wish that was more of the movie.
I think you said it really well. We were hungering for things the movie was dead set against giving us. And and that might be a cultural challenge, right? That might be a challenge for those of us who have been spending a lot of time watching Drive to Survive and really getting into the current cultural gestalt about, F1 and racing and what this sort of weird team sport is. But I can't quite ditch the fact that this is a fascinating story of a fascinating specific year, specific event with a texture, like a whole tableau of really interesting characters. And I'm not sure Enzo Ferrari was one of them.
Well, okay, so what this is really reminding me of is our conversation about Killers of the Flower Moon as well. And that, we had different feelings about it. Each of us were kind of juxtaposed in this one. But the idea of a historical time, I don't want to say an event, but a historical time, and then choosing who the narrative is rotating around to tell the story of that time or that event is a very interesting thing as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. And sort of my, I think, acceptance or my appreciation of the film is really that I gave in, or I allowed the film to be Ferrari's film, when really there are many other stories that could be told here. And there are many other stories of value that could have been told here too. And that's how I felt about Killers of the Flower Moon too. I just wasn't happy with the choice that Killers of the Flower Moon was. And I was happy with this choice because I bought in. I was with them and in hearing about Ferrari's place in history at this time during this event.
Talking about when you're saying about the peripheral things, when you're talking about who it should be based on, I get the feeling now one of the things that I'm having trouble with is it's as if Michael Mann thinks I read that book and now want to see it come to life, because then the first 5 times someone says Mille Miglia, I'm like, what are we doing? I don't know anything about this sport, these people, this team, where Ferrari is in the pecking order of this, what other cars, I don't know anything. And it refuses to hold me by the hand, when instead it really makes sure that I know that they had a lot of fun with his kid before he died.
Yeah.
That is made extremely clear. They're like they slow down for things that I think are a snapshot and speed over things that I need to create the world. The fact that you've already said that this ended the Mille Miglia, I don't care for that name, forever because of what happened, that's fascinating.
Isn't that the name of Thor's hammer?
Mille Miglia.
I realize it would be pedantic to correct you, that you already know the answer, and I'm going to walk away from that. I won't pick up your bait. So let's talk just a little bit about what was going on at the time, because this is true. Piero Taruffi was Patrick Dempsey. And when he finished the Mille Miglia, after winning, he wrote an article for the Saturday Evening Post, an editorial titled "Stop Us Before We Kill Again."
Wow.
And he said the open road races like the Mille Miglia need to be put to death. He went on and said that I tried to look as a victor should look, but in my heart there was only despair, for I realized that the Mille Miglia had become too dangerous and I must be one of its pallbearers. 1957 was the 24th and final edition of the race, and it still goes on, but it is now a parade of exotic cars, right? Like historic cars. It's not a race.
Oh, that's fun.
Interesting.
So if you go back to what was happening right before that, this was 1957. In 1955, a better-known international road race, the Le Mans, actually had an even more horrific accident.
2 years prior.
2 years prior, a racer had to take an emergency pit stop, pulled into pit, and Frenchman Pierre Leve's Mercedes-Benz sailed into the air, exploded, hurtled into a low barrier where it rolled into a grandstand on fire and killed 82 spectators,
What?
leaving 120 injured.
Oh, jeez.
Naturally killing LeVay, as
Yeah.
probably expected. This was the most catastrophic crash in all of motorsport history. And after that, Mercedes just said, you know what, we're not even going to race anymore until 1989. They finally came back into racing, which is actually a thing, because I swear there was a Mercedes in this
There
race,
was
which
multiple-
shouldn't have been.
Or multiple shots of at least one.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. And Switzerland banned motor racing for good until this year.
2020.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So this was a crazy time in motorsports right now, because it was the most dangerous sport, right?
Clearly.
The risk reward was just, the gap was so high, so
That
big.
would have been thrilling to know, because that would have put more stakes for me. I just didn't know what to
Yes.
expect. I didn't know what I was supposed to expect. And then, like, the biggest thing and the most important thing was to win the race. It wasn't about, because I didn't know that this tragedy was coming. And he did win the race off camera.
Yes.
We didn't even see him
We
win
don't
the
even
race.
know
We
who
find
won
out
until
we find
he's-
out later
Yeah.
that Patrick Dempsey won.
Okay, let me yes,
Gross.
you guys are right, but that's because it doesn't matter. The point is, the race doesn't matter. You guys are buying into that thing that you've said, which again I don't want to take away from, about them glossing over these points that you wanted to see more of and spending too much time with the things that you didn't. But
How
this
can
is
the race
about-
not matter? That
That's-
was the whole point. The whole movie was about, he has to win this race in order to keep his company. No?
It's so poetic. Like, literally what you're saying is, yes, that is what he focused on. And the reality was, it wasn't what mattered. That Ferrari's life, that these moments, that this time with his family, him negotiating with his wife and living and making these decisions are what truly mattered. That stuff happens off screen because that's what history remembers. But in Ferrari, again, and I am being an apologist for this movie because I bought into it. So I don't even know how much I agree with these points, but the point that I want to make is the reason that I liked it is because it told me that Ferrari's life wasn't about the winning, and it wasn't about those things that the news and history will tell you, that it was about all these other things, all these tragedies and things that he lived through so that he could continue his broken family, which it was. I don't want to say it was a success, but he made it through despite the death and the winning and all those other things that people will tell you about Ferrari. And I think, it's weird, but like, you put it there and you compare it to like Ford v Ferrari, which I think was also a fantastic movie, but Ferrari in Ford v Ferrari is, and I don't mean Ferrari the person, I mean Ferrari the entity, the brand
yeah.
is somewhat off screen. It's just this cutthroat to win, all these things. And they give you that in this movie. They show you how he does that. But again, it's not the point of the movie. And that's, I appreciated that. So I can understand why maybe you wanted to see more of those things. And yes, they are interesting. And yes, movies should be made about that. But that's not what this movie is about for me. This movie is about Enzo and how Enzo lived through all this, despite them being these big crises.
And I think, JJ, I think that is a thing that I appreciated about the movie. The fact that, if we buy into that side of this argument, this is the sort of the end of a Titan. This is the fall of a Titan. When he sits down with those guys and says, if you don't, nobody's forcing you to get in one of my cars. But if you do get in my car, you have to know that death is on the line.
Right.
And he doesn't say that like out loud, but, he says it as much. Just know, make sure the other guy makes a mistake or don't come back, kind of a thing, right? Yeah. Do what you need to do. And that is a really, that was, I think, a controversial perspective to have in 1957 when you're preparing for this race 2 years after Le Mans. And that, I think, is the challenge of the movie. And I'm not arguing, I don't think, that I want a completely different movie. I think I'm taking the line that I want more stakes, as Tom said, by giving me more of the racing cultural background just as a setup. Instead, we got old footage of Adam Driver in the in the old-timey footage, which I thought was silly. And as a result, that opportunity cost was I didn't understand. The movie doesn't help me understand the stakes that we're working under here. That in fact, Enzo sitting down and having that conversation is saying, I expect you to die just like those idiots in Le Mans because they took it too hard too. And that is an antiquated perspective. And the movie should have been more powerfully suggestive of that, because having separate families and taking kids' names and all of these things are further representations of old mentality to new mentality. Shailene Woodley says as much. She says, God, I should be a modern woman for you. Boy, that would throw you for a loop, right? Like, that's part of the story. And I just don't feel like the movie set up the stakes well enough for me to walk away having felt as strongly as you do about it.
That makes sense.
That's why, I like what you said about the second viewing. I would like to watch this movie again.
Yes.
Just because now that I know what its compartment is, I want to meet it on its terms and start to dig deeper into that instead of waiting for the next thing that I was assuming it was going to show me, which it didn't.
Ferrari. Like, you close your eyes, you think of a car. What color is it?
Red.
Right? That's Enzo's, that's his whole thing, right? Like he I think felt, and he said as much, like, ask a child to draw a car, he said, and certainly he will draw it red. And that has been, largely his legacy. Like, Ferrari is an icon. He managed to be an icon. Do you walk away from this movie having your impression of the icon impacted at all?
I definitely separate them in my mind, only because in this sort of really weird way, I think that the way that I was brought up with brands as a child of the 80s was divorced from people. Like, I don't even think of Ford as and these are people in the story, right? Ford, Fiat to some degree, like these things, I don't think of them as people. So I have this concept of what Ferrari was as a brand, and nothing about the telling of Ferrari as a man changed it for me. That being said, the concept of the financial trouble and the struggles for the factory and everything that happened there, and Ferrari needing Fiat to some degree to grow and all these things, that definitely affects the way that I feel about Ferrari, the brand, and learning more about what it had to struggle through to get to where, again, placed in my mind as someone who maybe saw, I don't even know if it was a Ferrari, but in License to Drive, you remember that movie, License to Drive, with Corey Feldman? And yeah, like, there's big red car there. I'm like, I think it's a Ferrari. Like, it's just this mythical thing in my mind as a young person. And now the way the movie has affected me or has changed me is to realize that it had struggles and it isn't a myth. It's not a legend.
Yeah.
It's something that's happened over time.
It was fragile.
Yeah.
Right?
For a long time.
It was a fragile brand. And this is, by the time I'm with you, I'm a Ferrari of the 80s guy. So my Ferrari is Magnum's Ferrari.
Nice.
The Magnums, like the 308, the 328, like those were my Ferrari. And I remember when we got the Testarossa, that was like late in the 80s. And I was like, oh my God, this is a brand that I am going to be excited about for the rest of my life. They just look they're incredible. They're incredible cars. And so I like to watch this. It is a little bit like knocking your icon off a pedestal just a bit to remind you of the humanity that underpins all of the mechanics, right? All of the hammering of the iron and creating the power that thrusts the engine across the country, right? I thought that was particularly amazing. We should talk about Erik Messerschmidt.
Yes.
Dear new friend of the show,
yes.
Erik Messerschmidt. What'd you think of how it was shot?
Well, I loved it. And so I have lots of opinions about it. After we talked to Erik, we saw The Killer. And now we're seeing this too. And in all of it, like, I kind of wish we had seen the movies first because I have so many specific questions. In particular.
And he's the DP for all of these movies. We just want to reset the table. Go ahead.
Thank you. And there were so many different motion control things in this movie, and it was varied. It was used differently at different times with different methods, which I'm gobbling it up as a cameraman, trying to figure out how why the choices were made the way they were. Some of it was very shaky. It did not look gyroscopically stabilized, which was really surprising to me. I want to know why the aerials were shot in a way that wasn't stabilized, and was it what was the purpose of that? Some of it was really stabilized and could have been potentially drone footage. A lot of the camera shots when we're watching the racing or the cars moving were very low, and it was this really sort of, and it felt very exciting to me as to see the cars coming to us at a very low way. I loved all that, and I would love to ask him all the questions about that, about those choices. One other thing that I noticed from the camera perspective, I listened to Adam Driver recently was on an episode of the Smart List podcast talking about this movie. And he mentioned some of Michael Mann's specific things that he does. And because of that, I was very hyper aware of some of those shots, particularly in the mortuary scene or the funeral, the cemetery scene early on, where we get Adam Driver over his right shoulder looking at the grave of Dino and stuff like this. And I'm like, oh, this is classic Michael Mann. And it was the kind of thing of him talking about how Michael Mann really focuses on the eyes and the way that the pupils look in each shot and all this stuff. And I was very hyper aware of all that stuff. And I love the way that Erik delivered Michael Mann's vision. And I thought I was very happy with the camera all the way through. I do want to ask the questions about the shaky aerials.
Yeah, the racing footage in particular was stunning.
Yeah.
It actually felt dangerous.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you want to feel in those ridiculous toy cars that they're driving around while smoking. That was the craziest stuff. Like Patrick Dempsey, the first thing he says is like, there's no ashtray. And he's like, oh my God. Yeah, like I thought all of that was really, really exciting. Did he say something about, I don't know if I blinked, when the first driver, again, in like economic of storytelling, he's like, I don't need a new driver. Whoops. Okay. You're hired. When that first guy in the time trial dies, it looked like he hit a very small speed bump. And then in the next shot, he was like 40 feet up in the air. Did I miss something?
What he did, so maybe he was unable to downshift in gears as he was going into a tight turn. So as he came around the corner, he was moving too fast. So the vehicle then rolled and lifted off the ground. That's what I think. I
missed the roll. It just seemed like all of a sudden everything was up in the air. So I think I looked away or sneezed or something right at that moment. Okay. That looked a little funny to me.
The shot in general, right? This was going into this movie. This was the accident that I was waiting for, because it was.
You knew it was coming?
Clip of it. Well, yeah.
Oh, the time trial. We're talking about the time trial or the
no? We're talking about the final
Miglia?
in the race, the big one in the race. Oh, you're talking about the initial time trial.
Correct.
No, you're right. You're right. Yes, I didn't know that was coming. No, that was new. No, I was talking about the last shot, and I will say before we get to that last shot, this movie felt to me like a Michael Mann film. It had the tone and texture of a Michael Mann film.
Yes.
I felt like I could have just as easily been watching Heat. I like it. I like the tone of it. I like the use of close-ups when they're in car, and the way they shoot. They were shooting like close-ups of eyes, half faces, masks, looking in the mirrors. Like, I thought that was incredibly compelling, super energetic, and claustrophobic, right? Like it's these guys are in open top cars, and there's no roll mechanics, there's nothing, and they are just. It still felt compressed and small to me, and I thought that was a really interesting thing to do. The shot that I had trouble with going into the movie was the shot that they'd used in the trailer, and it was the only shot in this movie that jumped out as unfinished CG. It felt like storyboard CG, like composite to me, and that was the biggest. That is the principal accident of the movie. Did it hit you guys sideways when the car was actually rolling over the crowd?
No, only because, so the reason why I reacted so strongly when you said you were expecting it is it's potential that I didn't see the trailer or that trailer. So I didn't know it was coming, and I knew nothing about the accident. So
me either.
When it happened, I was I wasn't objective enough in what I was looking at, in that I could they set up very well. The drama of something bad was about to happen. I understood that leading up to it. But then the way that it happened in puncturing the tire and then launching and then into the crowd. And then, I mean, it was all so emotionally intense for me, which a lot of times car accidents in films are for me. But especially because I didn't know it was coming, and and setting it up with Fonz, like having this moment of this sort of City of Angels moment of everything's great. And then boom, like I was on the ride for it. So I didn't notice those CG type things. It was very intense and it was very effective in communicating the emotion to me. But I think probably your objectivity allowed you to be a little bit more aware of what you were seeing.
Yeah, it was. I think that was probably the frustration that we had talked to Erik about it, and he said of that trailer, he was like, I wish they hadn't used that particular clip in the trailer.
I don't think it belongs in the trailer.
Yeah, it was too much. But can you see yourselves as Ferrari drivers?
No. I'm a real Mazda boy.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
The most expensive of the Ferraris in this movie, and this is one of the things that we got out of the conversation that we had with Erik, was that they did not drive the actual Ferraris. They brought the Ferraris in, ignited them, recorded sound, got some close-ups, but they were not allowed to touch the Ferraris because they couldn't insure them for anyone not the Ferrari organization to do it. But the most expensive one used in the movie was the Ferrari 335 Sport Scaglietti, and that came in at $35.7 million.
Oh my God.
The most expensive Ferrari ever sold is I believe it's the GTO 250 GTO. And once you get up into these kinds of numbers, it's auction kind of stuff, and so it fluctuates. But in 2018, a Ferrari 250 GTO in silver blue became the most expensive vehicle ever sold. I just sort of chokes me to say the numbers for a car. Only has 2 seats. $70.2 million.
Wow. Well, and I would like to say, I mean, you asked me if I felt like a Ferrari driver. I don't know that I'd ever feel like I could drive an actual Ferrari, but I do drive really angrily into my garage. So does that make me?
Oh, interesting.
I might be that.
You're a Ferrari driver.
There you go.
Yeah.
They haven't given you a Ferrari. I think they are gloriously beautiful cars. And yeah. I'll tell you where I am. This shows you the kind of car trash I am. If you were to give me a Ferrari looking kit car, I'm all about it. I'll drive a fake Ferrari all day long. You put a bug engine in it, and I'll drive it around all day long. I think they are some of the most beautiful cars that have ever been made, and this era of Ferrari is extraordinary. So that's the story of this thing.
One of the reasons, and maybe this is, now that I'm saying it out loud, maybe it's the reason that I didn't see it coming. They seem to make a really big deal about when you go to the stop, because there's little stops, you have to hand them this little piece of paper.
Yes.
And then they're like, you'll be disqualified if you don't. And then they showed everyone doing it. And then they show the guy who does not make it past the accident clearly not hand it to him. He gets out and he looks under, and then he kisses his wife and he leaves. Was he going to be disqualified anyway? I was like, why isn't this coming out? Oh, and then he's rolling over people. Uh-huh. Was that, what do you know any of the history of why was it just seemed like something that didn't pay off unless it was supposed to be a watch this hand, not this hand kind of a thing. Because I was assuming, oh, what a tragedy, this new wonderkind is going to be disqualified. And instead he was disqualified from life.
So my guess, and I don't know the answer to this, but my guess is that it isn't relevant to the story in particular, but in hearing Adam Driver talk about Michael Mann, that Mann has a sort of near obsession about being as historically accurate as possible, going to the actual barber shop where Ferrari visited and that kind of stuff. And I would assume that the card passing was such a relevant, important thing about this kind of race that it was key that it be mentioned there to Mann. But I don't see it as necessarily relevant to the story in that way. Disqualified.
That sequence, I'm glad you brought that sequence up, because it's really important for a number of reasons. The first, that it gives the chance for the driver to get out and say, to Portago gets out and he says, look, these tires, I know the tires suck, but I can make it. Like I'm behind a slower car and I have to make up that time. And I'm in a car powerful enough to do it. And as a result, my headcanon filled in the blank that said, maybe his sidecar guy, his navigator, actually handed the card over. Whatever reason, I just kind of let that go, because the more important piece that was captured there is when he gets back in the car and his girlfriend leans in to kiss him. That was actually captured by as today an unnamed, uncredited photographer, but it is known as the last kiss or the kiss of death. That photo of actress Linda Christian leaning in to kiss De Portago during his stop in northern Italy. He was killed literally moments later. Right after that, it was the last kiss, and she said of that moment, "I had a strange sensation with that kiss. It was cold, and it caused me to look for the first time at Nelson seated behind him. He seemed to be like a mummy, gray, ashen, as if mesmerized. He had the eyes of someone who had suffered an enormous shock." That image sits in the Bettman archive stored in the Iron Mountain National Underground Storage Facility, a former limestone quarry located 220 feet below ground in western Pennsylvania. Thank you, Wikipedia. It is a haunting
Are we worried
kiss.
it might get out?
Yeah, right.
Why are we wargamings that?
Right.
It is a haunting photograph, and especially after this movie, to look at this and realize, oh, this was it. This was before he did something out of his control and extraordinary, and lost his life. So I think that's an interesting bit of an aside. Has nothing to do with the card. I think that was the point. Right? The card is, we already got the card. We understand the card.
I guess. Yeah.
I guess. Music. The music was lovely. Music was by, what's his, where is it? Oh, Daniel Pemberton. How do we feel about Dan Pemberton stuff?
Pemberton. I liked it in the film, too.
Yeah, me too.
It was very appropriate.
I thought it was very appropriate. It was culturally resonant. It drove when the driving happened, and I thought it was really, really good. Okay, well, we've got just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to do our now is the time. I mean, we have to lean in, find those stars, take them away, rip them from other films that are less deserving, and see how they land up for us. Letterboxd. We are on Letterboxd, letterboxd.com/thenextreel. And I know you guys aren't cataloging your stars maybe as authentically, accurately as others do, diligently. But I do have to know, where are you going to put your stars for this film? And if you had to take stars from another movie, where would you take them from? A whole new vector.
What? Yeah. What is this new thing that we're doing?
Yeah, I'm making it up.
Oh, okay. I'm not prepared.
I have this thing in my head that, what if there was a finite number of stars for your life? Like, there are a finite number of weeks, heartbeats, whatever. What if you started running out of stars? Where would you take your stars from for this movie? So dumb.
Well, I
just don't know how to answer it.
I think I mentioned before that I compared this movie a lot to Oppenheimer in my mind. Yep. And I think that on its own, this movie probably is sitting at a nice 2 stars for me. And then I take 2 from Oppenheimer. One for length and the other for stakes. Y'all keep talking about stakes. And the focus of Oppenheimer, this is my primary criticism of Oppenheimer. The stakes of Oppenheimer, the base main through story, is him losing his security clearance, which I think is the most ridiculous thing.
It's his legacy.
No,
that's how he's going to be drilled down into history.
Yes, that's the high thing. But
this is the same movie. It might as well be called Ferrarenheimer.
It's all based on this event of him literally defending his security clearance. Like, who cares? Like that. Like, find some other way to tell the story. So I'm taking that from this because we have this life and death. Last time this race ever happened, people died, all because of the drama of what Ferrari needs to get by. So I end up giving it 4 stars and a heart. I liked it quite a bit.
All right, Tom. I imagine you're going to take your stars from JJ's review of this
That's what
movie.
I was about to do. I was about to move the slider around, but you beat me to it. Yeah, I don't know what I'm taking it from. I'm taking them from the actual sky, and I'm going to give this I'm going back and forth between a 2.5 and a 3. I'm actually going to give it a 3 because it's an extremely competent movie. And it's got some thrilling scenes and it looks great. And I thought when they were allowed to, it was well acted. It just wasn't the story that I was looking for. And maybe I'll feel better about it on a new rewatch. So I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5.
Okay. I'm going to land with JJ at a 4, and that I think may be a 4 of hope because I had some non-trivial quibbles and some performance issues that I felt like took me out of the movie every time we went back to the house. I just was out of the movie, and so that's hard, but it is very close to being just a perfect movie for me. Right? I mean, it's really very close, and I think so much of JJ pushing back on our quibbles in general have just reinforced why I do appreciate this movie as much as I do. Like, I think it is a really good movie. It's not the movie I expected, and I low-key can't wait to watch it again.
Nice.
So, really fun, you guys. So this was great. What are we doing next month? This will be for the month of February. JJ?
We are going to take a step into the twisted mind of Matthew Vaughn. Is that right? Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Is it twisted?
It's twisted.
It's so
I don't
twisted.
find his mind to be twisted. I just like his movies. So
That's what the trailer says.
I know.
Because
We're
we
gonna-
used to say from the twisted mind of Danny DeVito. There's been a few like twisted mind directors, and Matthew has the helm right now, which
I
is very
guess
exciting.
I understand that there are some graphic and shocking things in some of the movies that he makes, but I just like them. I think they're a lot of fun. So we're going to go see Argyle, which comes out first week of February. We'll probably talk about it a little bit later than that, but we are planning to see it and learn about it and see if it is as exciting and twisted as they tell us it might be.
So twisted. Is it as twisted? Are you looking forward to Twist, Tom? Is that your favorite? Are you a Matthew? Are you a Vaughn head?
I do. I am. What?
Oh,
I
good.
do. I am. I do. I am.
Okay, good. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out and just jumping around the track with us here. We're talking about Ferrari. Great movie. Go see it. I think that we can say. Go see it. Because it's, judging by the number of people who were in the theater with me today, it's not going to be around here for very long. So, if you get a chance, run out and see it. It is good on a big screen. It is shot really, really well, and it's beautiful. So for that reason alone, check it out. Thanks for hanging out with us. On behalf of Tommy Metz III and Justin Jaeger, I'm Pete Wright. We'll see you next month with Argyle, meeting adjourned.